Fruit salad, the problem with being a rich kid, Porsche, Land Rover, Ferrari, faking it, 20 minutes, the barn. As Squid and I high-stepped it out of the barn, through the yellow grass leading to the road, Coach's red Subaru pulled up right in front of us, the tires crackling on the black tarry streaks on the pavement. He opened his car door, leaving the Subaru running. He slammed the door shut. "You guys didn't make it to the turnaround point," he said, his hands on his waist, his eyes red-rimmed and tired-looking. "You been hiding in that barn?" I didn't know how to respond. I suddenly felt as if Squid had betrayed me, lured me into his evil ways somehow. I felt duped. "Coach," said Squid matter-of-factly, I hide in that barn every time we run out here. I hide in the kiddie playground when we run through the park. And when I can't find a decent place to hide, I walk. I almost never do the actual workout." I was surprised and confused by this tactic. I had been formulating a lie, something to do with a fear of sunstroke or an injured foot. Anything but the truth. I didn't get it. "I'm not cutting you, Sydney," said Coach in a tired voice. "I'll give you my lifetime free card at Pollo Loco," Squid whined. "I'll pay you." "I'm done with this conversation, Porter. Now, you run back to the school. It ought to take you no more than 20 minutes if you just jog slowly." Then he turned his attention to me. "K1," he said, "get in the car." I looked at Squid. He shrugged his soft shoulders. "Lucky you," he said. "Looks like you're getting a ride back." "You know, Porter, I need to make another group for you," shouted Coach as I walked around the back of his car to the passenger's side door, wondering what I'd done to deserve a ride while Squid had to hoof it back. "You don't do the proud bluebird justice." Squid shocked me by giving Coach the finger as he began lumbering back toward the school. "Fruit salad, Sydney," shouted Coach happily, in spite of being flipped off by his worst runner. "Eagles, hawks, bluebirds, and fruit salad. I'll post it. You're now a group of one." Coach got in behind the driver's wheel and turned his small, dark eyes on me. He just stared at me for 5 or 6 seconds before shaking his head disappointedly. "Does that mean I'm fruit salad too?" I asked. "Nope," he said. "You're still just a little bluebird. You've lost your way, but you're still a bluebird." That was Squid, ruining my existence. Why is it that extreme wealth is such an unhealthy backdrop for a kid's life? Perhaps it's that boys or girls from wealthy families always believe deep down that they're taken care of, that they've got a vast safety net stretching out from cradle to grave beneath them, and that sense of security creates a deep apathy in them. Maybe it's that our culture values and admires wealth so much that someone from a moneyed background feels deeply superior to those around him and doesn't harbor the deep compulsion, the need, you might even say, to prove oneself. Maybe rich kids don't feel that anxiety that often leads to greatness or even competence. Whatever the reason rich kids are so often a mess, Squid was a case in point. He was Exhibit A for how being rich with someone else's money, his father's, I mean, he never earned a dime of it, is mentally and emotionally unhealthy. Squid's father dropped him off every morning for practice. He arrived in a Porsche 911 convertible if it was hot, a blustery rainstorm coming, weather providing a chance for some rugged outdoorsmanship, and he rolled up in a British racing green Land Rover Defender. Perfect days were the days we waited for. If the day was deemed a perfect day by Squid's dad, no chance of rain, light or no wind, high of 75 degrees, he and his son would growl into the school parking lot in a bright red Ferrari Testarossa. Squid's dad had made a fortune with a franchise of Mexican fast food restaurants called Pollo Loco. That means crazy chicken. It seemed a slightly undignified way to make piles of cash, serving hundreds of thousands of greasy 59-cent tacos to the lard-covered folks of the American Middle West. But the majority of those cars the majesty of those cars made up for that. Squid said there were more than 300 Pollo Loco locations in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and Illinois. And he had a card that got him as much free food as he wanted at any of those fine establishments. At the time, he seemed to be one of the luckiest guys in the world to me. His family was rich. His dad kept a loose rein on him and bought him everything, almost, that he wanted. I didn't envy his gelatinous body or his incredibly slow mile time. I came to learn that his mild obesity was a key element in the running story of Sidney Porter. His dad, while he didn't have much time for Squid, wasn't going to tolerate having a fat son, at least without attempting to do something about it. So the question is, how did Squid, the lowest guy on the team, the only non-freshman bluebird until he became fruit salad, and I become training partners and eventually partners in crime? Well, after my nerd brother destroyed me in Angel Devil, I hit a bit of a rough stretch. My confidence dropped through the floor. It was also true that the miles were starting to add up and my body was being worn down. Having never trained before, having never run even bluebird mileage, less than 30 miles a week, the training we were doing was taxing on my virgin muscles. They weren't used to being used every day and they were rebelling. I remember struggling down the stairs in the morning, hobbling like an octogenarian, feeling like my legs would never loosen up again. It felt as if someone had been working my thighs and calves over with the peen side of a ball-peen hammer. I came to suspect that gnomes lived under my bed, gnomes that liked to work over my legs with their cruel little tools as I slept. Nearly every night during those first weeks of training, I woke up to excruciating cramps in the arches of my feet. It was as if vice grips had been clamped on the muscles, then cranked tight until I woke in spastic agony, nearly flopping out of my bed due to the pain. Combine the physical torments with the mental anguish of having my brother rip my future identity from me, and I was ripe for the pickings of a guy like Squid, who was, like me, miserable and looking for company. Always a strong liar, I sulked around and faked a few days' worth of injuries after Angel Devil. During practice, while Keenan and my brother were out getting better, I sat with a cute girl from the soccer team who was also faking an injury in the dark, cool high school training room. We both iced imaginary strains and massaged make-believe pulls. We listened to the radio and chatted about what high school was going to be like. We gossiped about teachers and other freshmen. We talked about movies we'd seen. It was all very pleasant. But then her coach required her to get back at it, and I didn't like sitting there in the training room by myself. When I got back on the roads, I had lagged far behind the lead bluebirds. I was a dog with his tail between his legs. I even let tiny Leonardo Chavez and oafish Popeye pull away after the first mile of our workouts. That left me with Squid. "I hate this crap," he told me one surprisingly fresh and pleasant August morning. The corn on either side of us rippled like a vast green inland ocean as we lagged further and further behind the pack. "The only reason I'm here is because my dad's making me." "I hate it too," I surprised myself by saying. "Why do we do a sport that's so hard?" "This is the only sport that doesn't have cuts," Squid replied, looking at me as if I was stupid. "If I don't do a sport, I've got to work at Pollo Loco. No way that's happening. Besides," he added, "I kind of like Coach. He's really crazy." Squid's breathing, even though we were slogging through a 9 or 10 minute mile that felt like a shuffle to me, was loud and raspy. He slapped the soles of his $100 trainers, gray New Balance 999s, total old man shoes that no real runner would wear, on the pavement with each step. We were heading out to the hinterlands, and the slapping of his shoes competed with the morning whir of the bugs and chirps of the birds. "And," he huffed, "if I break 20 minutes, my dad said I can have one of his cars." I immediately thought of the Testarossa. "Even the Ferrari?" I asked. "Not that one." He rolled his eyes at my presumption. "But any of the others." He passed a long, high-pitched fart, without seeming to notice. "It doesn't matter. There's no way I can break 20. What Squid would have had to accomplish in order to earn himself a $50,000 Land Rover Defender or Porsche Carrera convertible was run 6 minutes and 25 seconds per mile for 3 miles and about 200 meters. While that's not a bad effort, it's true that most guys who stick with cross-country through their senior years break 20. In fact, most do it their first year. Breaking 20 is probably doable if you just decide you want it bad enough. And there was, to the naked eye at least, nothing physically wrong with Squid. These were my thoughts after Squid told me his dad's bargain. What I said to Squid was less analytical and slightly more emotional. "You gotta be shitting me," I shouted. His comment that he couldn't do it hadn't even registered. I was already envisioning the two of us behind the windshield of that awesome Land Rover, nonchalantly pulling up to the DQ parking lot like a couple of studs. "I'm not shitting you," he said, huffing and puffing. "Let's stop for a while. I'm really tired." "Man," I said, excited for both me and my new best friend, "that's cake. You can do it this year." Squid eyed me. He looked at that moment exactly like the stereotypical spoiled rich kid. He had a mop of dirty blonde hair, no distinct biceps or triceps, just soft tubes for arms. He had baby arms. He also had a pair of flabby breasts that would have embarrassed a fifth-grade girl, they were so big. He definitely could have used a training bra. He looked like the kind of kid whose mom gave him chocolate when he got tired, and who got tired a lot. "Didn't you hear me?" he said. "I'm not breaking 20. There's no goddamn way." He nodded up the road a little way. "Let's go hide in the shade in there." Squid pointed at a ruined gray barn that looked like it had fallen in on itself sometime during the Depression. "We can hide out until everyone passes us on their way back to the school." Now, I didn't mind blowing off workouts. I didn't even mind the dishonesty of faking an injury. Every time I faked an injury, I somehow got myself to half believe that I might actually be a little bit injured. It didn't seem like a complete deception. However, hiding from my coach and teammates seemed a little much. "Don't you think it might be dangerous in there? It's probably private property," I said. "There could be dogs, boards with rusty nails in them." Squid waved his hand dismissively. "I hide in there all the time," he said. It was kind of a hot day. At least it would be in a few hours. Keenan and my brother were now clearly out of my reach, seeing as they'd had a good week of practice while I had wallowed in self-pity and deceit. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly, I thought, or in my case, if you're going to half-ass it at all, why not be a complete and utter weenie like Squid? I decided it was fine to join him in the barn, just this once. I have to admit, there was a real feeling of pleasure, even a strange superiority of a sort, as we sat in the cool of the barn and watched the first eagles struggle past, Slade leading the grim-faced pack. Bowden and Swart bringing up the rear, talking about colleges. Then came the Hawks. There was something exciting about hearing their soles slapping on the pavement and sitting silently in that barn, knowing they didn't know we were there. Then Keenan, my brother, leading the Bluebirds by a quarter mile, all streaming with sweat. Then Popeye, bumbling past, looking like he was about to fall on his face, his head staring down at the pavement like he'd been hypnotized by the faded yellow dashes on the road. Lastly, Leonardo Chavez, seemingly near death, crept past us, his eyes nearly shut, his face tilted slightly upward toward the sky in an attitude of prolonged agony. "Now we jump right back in where we were," said Squid, a big rich kid grin on his face. "I get away with this every time." Right after those karmic words was when Coach rolled up and caught us, sending Squid on his way and inviting me into his Subaru for what would prove a most interesting ride.